On this week's KSP News Show, 1.1 release date gets pushed back to early 2016, and lighting shaders in KSP revised, so for the first time we get reflections of ships and windows. All that and more on this week's KSP News Show.
It took you long enough to make it, though.
Shut up.
Sorry. Was that on recording again?
Yes, yeah it was.
God damn it.
Reporting live from the Kerbal Space Center, it's your host, Jinli Kerman.
Good morning, evening and afternoon, my fellow Kerbonauts. My name is Jinli Kerman. Welcome back to this week's KSP News Show. Wow, it's been a long time since I've actually said that. I think it's about 3 weeks as I'm recording this episode since I actually last uploaded a KSP News episode. And that's because there hasn't really been all that much real news in relation to actual KSP stuff, as 1.0.5 obviously has just come out. I'm enjoying it very, very much. It's actually a very, very clean release. There's been a small patch to actually update some of the various bugs that did come with the release. But aside from that, there really hasn't been, until this show, a lot of KSP news that we can update you with regards to 1.1. So I'm really glad that this week there is actually a news story that warrants a show, that's got enough meat to it to warrant a show, as it were. So without further ado, let's get straight into those stories right about now. So yeah, this first news story, initially it does look like quite a pessimistic news story, but once you get into it, as I've said with previous delays, it is nothing but a good thing for the game at the end of the day. Last Tuesday, the dev notes released and they were titled Optimistic Goals, and they began like this. Hi everyone. This is a week in which we made a big decision. We have to owe up to setting 2 optimistic goals. Kerbal Space Program is a labour of love, and we want to see the game all it can possibly can be. In the case of Update 1.1, 3 weeks of QA and experimentals just won't do justice of the quality of the game we aim for if you consider that nearly all areas of the game have been updated in some way, and that's assuming we'd be able to finish the work by the end of the week. This will be the largest overhaul to existing parts of the game we have ever done, and that we ever intend to do. Almost every single part of the user interface has been changed. Releasing the update with minimal testing is going to leave a lot of bugs unsolved and will ruin the experience of everyone who plays the game. As a result, we've decided to swallow our collective pride, drop the pre-Christmas release deadline, and push the release for Update 1.1 into 2016, meaning that 1.0.5 will have to hold you over until then. We're confident you understand this decision and support it. Now, this is actually a piece of information that I missed from a couple of dev notes ago because it really was a tiny piece of information, but initially Squad were aiming to get 1.1 out in time for Christmas, similar to how we got 0.90 sort of like 2 days before Christmas as sort of Squad's Christmas present to all us KSP players last year. But unfortunately, it does seem that 1.1 is just such a huge update that unfortunately it doesn't look like we're going to be seeing it in 2015. And that does initially sound like a negative thing, but trust me, as we've seen in the past, this is definitely not a negative thing for the game. If you guys cast your mind back to the 1.0 release, I don't want to say that I was necessarily rushed out of the door, but it was rushed out of the door by Squad in order to try and meet an internal and external goal, in order to sort of satisfy the hype the fans have built up. And I guess I am one of the guilty parties in that, because I did hype up 1.0 quite a lot, put it that way. And as a result, we got a rather buggy and messed up products, and it did take several patches. I think it went up to 1.04 to actually get all of the heating bugs, all the aerodynamic bugs and glitches and various other tweaks actually integrated into the game, so that the game was an enjoyable experience once again. It wasn't terrible by any means, it wasn't a Battlefield 4, it was still playable, but it was still a few annoying bugs in there and everything that would cause the game to crash, that would do various different things that weren't very, very nice, and that was a result of the game being rushed out of the door. And so the fact that they are actually delaying this update now, initially it does sound like a bad thing, and I do admit there, it does sound like, oh, they're delaying it, they're being lazy, but trust me guys, Squad are not being lazy with this update. As you saw in there, in this little passage from the dev notes, there is so much changing in 1.1. It's basically going to be like a whole new game in the way it, well, not necessarily plays, but certainly how the way the game runs. And just all the general back-end stuff, it's like a completely new game. And so, as a result, I think delaying it is probably the best option out of all of this. We want to make sure that the game actually works when we get it, because you mess up one thing in the back end of a game, a back end code of a game, you have the potential of bringing everything down on top of you. So it's best to make sure that everything is working. It's sort of like trying to replace the steel bracing that sort of is like the framework of a skyscraper, while the skyscraper has already been built for 20 years. It's a slow and painful process, but it's going to be well worth it in the end. So good on Squad for actually having the courage to sort of man up and delay this update, because it is a big one, and when it does eventually drop, I'm sure the community are going to be very excited about it. I know I am, because I actually want KSP to run properly on my computer, seeing as it is starting to get on a little bit now. It's starting to chug a little bit while running KSP at sort of high-ish settings, so hopefully we will be seeing that optimization in early 2016. So I hope you guys do support this this decision by Squad. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm sure a lot of you guys will be supporting this decision, because it is ultimately the right thing to do, and I have my utmost respect for Squad for actually doing this. So yeah, we won't be getting 1.1 till 2016 now, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. As always, I'm really interested to hear. While we're on the subject of graphics and video games running well, actually, that's a really nice segue to get into the next story for today. So, obviously, as I've stated many times before, the Unity 5 upgrade that's coming in 1.1 is going to change a lot of the things with regards to the back end of KSP and how it runs, and also, as it turns out in this week's dev notes, some of the actual graphical settings of KSP. We all know that while it can be a very beautiful game, in certain moments, like when you're in orbit and you see like a solar eclipse with the moon and everything, and especially when you have some of the graphical enhancement mods on, KSP is beautiful, but just stock and just sort of driving around Kerbin, it's kind of boring, and that's just simply because of the engine it's made in. Unity can make some beautiful games, don't get me wrong, but just because of the sheer scope of the game, the graphics obviously do suffer a bit, especially in Unity 4.6. But thankfully Unity 5 does give Squad scope to actually improve the graphics of the game somewhat, and that is what they're trying to do here. At least in a small way anyway. In the dev notes it says Chris, aka Porkjet, has been tackling the changes that Unity 5 has brought to the shaders. For example, the Blim-Fong, I have no idea how to pronounce that, lighting model, which is used by most of the part shaders, suffers from an odd issue that causes spectacular highlights to look as if they were low quality and vertex based. Instead of writing a workaround, it was a more robust solution to switch to the new standard Unity 5 shader. The two shaders are very different though. The new standard shader is a physical based rendering model, which means different inputs, for example smoothness and gloss, and outputs such as metalness and occlusion are now required and given. Reworking all the textures from scratch is out of the question because it would take simply far too much time, so a conversion had to be worked out, and it ended up working quite well. An outstanding advantage of switching to the new shader system is we can now have shiny real-time reflections on smooth areas, such as windows and canopies. Now, I don't know if you guys remember that mod from a while back called Window Shine. I don't know if it's still being updated or not, but I certainly gave it a try for a while, and it did look pretty damn awesome actually, especially when you're in Kerbin orbit and you could see Kerbin sort of reflecting off of your craft's windows, like when you had the Mark 1 command pod and you could sort of see the little window that you can look out of, and reflecting Kerbin back in the actual in the craft scene that you fly your craft in. It did look genuinely awesome. However, when you were building in the VAB, it did kind of look like someone had basically stuck cellophane over the windows, which isn't a good look anyway. Now, I believe this is because all the Window Shine mod did was replace the standard window texture with just a simple shiny texture. Although I'm not sure there, I am not an expert in Unity by any means, and I haven't looked at any of the backend code or anything like that. But I think what it basically did was either overlaid or replaced the basic window texture with a more sort of shiny one, in order to actually kind of get the whole like glint effect when you you both pointed at the sun and were trying to reflect stuff off, like, basically, like, reflect Kerbin and the other planets in orbit. This small shader change, however, will mean that that's no longer needed, because it's going to basically make a more realistic sort of reflection, which means a reflective texture won't have to be, like, overlaid. It could just basically be incorporated from scratch. This will ultimately mean that the way the light's scattered in KSP now on a reflective surface will look a bit more realistic, and so it will improve the game's realism. That was a really, really silly thing to say. What I mean, of course, is that it will improve the way the game looks, even if it's just a little bit. And honestly, I think that that is a good thing, particularly in terms of like the lighting department, because at least from close up, I know that from long range, the lighting in KSP is spot on. But when you're really, really zoomed in on a ship, the shadows can look a bit pixelated and stuff like that. And I think these shaders do tweak shadows just a little bit, although I can't be certain on that, so do not quote me on that. But I definitely think that these reflections on smooth areas are definitely a very, very good change to the graphics. And it's a nice little improvement because it adds a little bit of extra realism into the mix when it comes to the lighting effects in KSP. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much going to round it off for this week's episode of the KSP News Show. I'm really, really sorry that this hasn't come out for like 3 weeks now. I have been very, very busy with college work, and in the wake of 1.05's release, there really hasn't been all that much sufficient news to warrant a show. Like I say, as it's the run up to Christmas as well, I've also been completely snowed under with college work until these brief few moments in which I can actually bring this video to you guys. So I'm really, really sorry. I'm trying to get videos out as often as I can, but at the moment I'm kind of only limited to one a week, if that. Just purely because of the fact that I literally do have so much to do at this point, bearing in mind it's the run up to Christmas. So like I say, I'm really, really sorry about that. Also, the follow-up video to the Stock Shuttles video that I uploaded previous to this one is going up at some point in the next week or so. It is the start of my mini-series, which is sort of like, I guess it's not the end, it's more sort of the climax of my KSP Missions series, but it's also a prequel to another series, which I am not willing to reveal yet because it's still very, very sort of like a process, in process of production, basically. Not sure how often I'm going to be able to get the videos out. It's not going to end up in like Operation Exploration, which is still going on as well, by the way. Episode 4 is in the works as we speak. But in terms of this new little mini-series, I'm not sure how regularly I'm going to be able to get them up. I'm going to try and get them semi-regularly because I just want to get this series done so I can get back to focusing on Operation Exploration and KSP News, because they're obviously my two core video series, as it were. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much a basic update on what's going on in the channel over the next few months or so, or few weeks, or whenever I decide to eventually schedule this, because I have so much to do at the moment. But I just want to take this opportunity to thank you guys so much for watching, subscribing, liking. As always, it is so appreciated. I still can't quite believe that I'm now well over 1,000 subscribers. It just literally means the world to me. Your support really, really does make a difference, and for that I am just completely thankful. And so yeah, with that, I am going to end this episode here. Remember to like and subscribe for more. My name is Jinley Kerman, and as always, stay classy.